Good morning. We'll wait a few more minutes just to get everyone online. All right. Greetings, everybody. My name is Claire Northall, and I'd like to welcome you to my presentation, Resources for Supporting Multilingual Writers in Academic Writing. So before we begin, a bit of housekeeping. Make sure you mute your microphone on Zoom. If you have questions during or after my presentation, there's a chat box at the bottom. You can type your question into the chat, or you can type your name. And after the presentation, you can ask your question, or I'll read your question and I'll answer it after my presentation. So please allow me to give you an overview of my presentation. First, I'll introduce my background and my teaching context. Then I'll explain relevant theoretical frameworks, which led me to my inquiry question. Then I'll briefly summarize my research, which offers rationale for these workshops. Last, I'll outline the teacher training workshop. So first, I have a question for you. Who do you picture when you think of the term multilingual writer? Some of you might be thinking about exchange students who are short-term, are here for a short time on a J1 visa. Some people might be thinking of international students who complete a majority of almost all of their college education in the US. And some people might think of recent immigrants or refugees. Some might think of children of immigrants who are born in the US and who learned a language other than English as their first language, and who may or may not be biliterate. This group is complex, and we have complex vocabulary to categorize them. For example, English language learner, generation 1.5, non-native writer, resident ESL, second language writer, or L2 writer. Each label has its own specific ideological orientation. Now, my project takes a broader perspective, and it's inclusive of these subgroups. Therefore, I'm using the term multilingual writer. Now, multilingual writers vary in linguistic proficiency levels, attitudes towards language, and levels of academic preparation, which makes it really difficult to make easy generalizations about this broadly defined group. However, multilingual writers who are enrolled in US colleges share a common goal: to perform competently across the curriculum, even as their English skills are developing. The multilingual learners that I work most frequently with are international students. I'm an instructor of a high intermediate oral skills class for international students at the American Language Institute, ALI, a pre-academic English for Academic Purposes program, EAP, at San Francisco State. And my students, my original inspiration for this project comes out of my reflection on my teaching. My students are a linguistically and culturally diverse group, and they have a variety of education goals. They come to the ALI for intensive English study, and a majority intend to transfer to San Francisco State, and about half of them intend to major in some aspect of business, according to student information surveys that I conduct at the beginning of each semester. ALI students are just beginning their academic journey, their US academic journey, and they're often so-called cultural newcomers. So as a teacher at the ALI, my job is to manage their behavior and expectations of US University. My goal is not only to give the students the language and skills necessary for them to be successful in their individual majors, but to socialize students into US University academic contexts. This pedagogical approach stems from my theoretical framework. The concept is academic language socialization. Academic discourse has been defined as a complex representation of knowledge, language, and identity. And academic discourse socialization is the process through which novices, such as multilingual learners, are socialized to become competent members of a group or a discourse community or community of practice. By acquiring culturally requisite skills for participating in the community, including appropriate ways of acting, feeling, and thinking, which are embedded in language learning. So according to these concepts, if I'm a business major and I want to learn to talk, act, and think like a business professional, to join a community of practice of business professionals, I would need a more experienced community member, such as my business instructor, to interact with and act as a socializing agent in order to be able to gain competence and membership to my chosen community of practice of business professionals. With this framework in mind, I do a lot of work socializing my students into US academic contexts. I make implicit expectations explicit. To give you an example from oral academic discourse, academic discussions. We watch example discussions and we analyze for effective language, such as the language for asking for clarification, or the language for adding to an idea, or how to politely disagree with each other. From my experience, I know that students can't acquire academic discourse overnight, and they need consistent support and practice. I know how important this work is, and I wonder what sort of explicit socialization my students get after they leave the ALI. I know that after my students leave my class and they transfer to the university, they often take composition courses, CMS, composition for multilingual students in the university, with instructors who have expertise with multilingual students, and those instructors often have a MATESOL from SFSU. And as students go into their major courses, my ALI students are likely to have less and less support, especially from discipline-specific writing intensive, especially in the discipline-specific writing intensive classes called GWAR, or Graduate Writing Assessment Requirement, at SF State, which are often taught by instructors without expertise in teaching multilingual writers. If my ALI students struggle in their GWAR classes, I wonder, how do other multilingual students who don't come through the ALI, how do they get that explicit training, and how are they being supported to be socialized into academia? Students complete my course and transfer to the university, I begin to wonder, GWAR instructors know their specific genres of their discipline, but do they know how to make the academic and social norms explicit? How well prepared are my students' major instructors who are tasked with the challenge of teaching genre-specific writing and therefore socializing students into their disciplines? This led me to my inquiry question. How could faculty across the disciplines, such as GWAR instructors and not just ESL faculty, be better prepared to help develop the language and literacy of multilingual learners? My literature review draws from 3 bodies of research: L2 writing, mainstream composition, and writing across the curriculum research. As I explored the issue of supporting multilingual writers in academic writing across the discipline, I found these key points. Faculty of writing intensive courses often don't have a theoretical background in language acquisition and assume that multilingual writers should be proficient enough to comprehend and produce post-secondary level of academic English. by the time that they arrive in their classrooms. And sometimes they blame students for inadequate English instruction. These instructors may not realize that acquiring academic discourse is a long-term ongoing process. And multilingual students need ongoing support throughout their academic careers and in their major courses, because there's a limit to the extent that multilingual writers can be prepared by an EAP program, especially when a majority of multilingual learners are not just international students, but resident ESL or Gen 1.5, and thus don't come through an EAP program like the ALI. Thus, faculty in each discipline, not only EAP instructors, are responsible for facilitating acquisition of the discipline-specific language and literacy necessary for students to join a chosen academic discourse community. And composition faculty, and therefore faculty teaching the writing-intensive courses such as GWAR, should be aware of multilingual students' needs and how instructors might act as socializing agents for multilingual students. At the same time, studies of mainstream composition instructors' perspectives show that faculty often felt underprepared to teach multilingual writers and lacked formal training to teach multilingual writing. So although the writing across the curriculum movement successfully increased emphasis on writing across undergraduate programs and shifted writing instruction from the sole domain of composition by creating discipline-specific writing-intensive courses, there's been little interdisciplinary research between L2 writing researchers and writing across the curriculum researchers, and multilingual students' issues seems to have been largely ignored. The writing across the curriculum movement has not provided the scaffolding to help multilingual students succeed as writers and has overlooked necessary faculty development programs that would offer training in working with multilingual writers. Multiple studies have called for faculty development and institutional support. As recently as 2014, the Council for Community College Writers, the primary US composition organization, released a policy statement urging writing program administrators to offer teacher preparation in second language writing theory, research, and instruction in the form of graduate courses or faculty workshops for instructors working with writers in a higher education context. While this policy statement provides specific suggestions for instructors of writing intensive courses in relation to writing assessment design and textual borrowing, the statement does not provide specific information on how writing across the curriculum administrators should be making the kinds of changes they suggest. So previous research has offered few explicit recommendations. In order to fulfill this need, I've outlined a teacher training workshop. My capstone project outlines a teacher training workshop I've titled Supporting Multilingual Learners in GWAR. And it's designed for writing intensive GWAR Business 300 instructors who have multilingual learners in their classes at San Francisco State. Now, GWAR stands for Graduate Writing Assessment Requirements, and it's an initiative at SF State to incorporate the principles from the writing across the curriculum movement and create writing intensive classes with effective writing pedagogy within each academic discipline or major. The specific writing intensive class for business majors at SF State is GWAR Business 300. Now, why the business major? Well, first of all, a majority of my ALI students report that they intend to major in business based on student background info surveys that I conduct at the beginning of each semester in the ALI. Now, I didn't have specific statistics from San Francisco State of undergraduate students who report themselves as multilingual because as far as I can tell, the university doesn't collect that info. But if we look at the numbers from the Office of International Programs, of the roughly 1,600 international students who are currently studying at San Francisco State, more than half of them major in business. Therefore, there's likely to be a substantial number of multilingual students in GWAR Business 300 classes. The teacher training workshop could be adapted for any discipline, but a biology instructor is not going to be teaching the same writing genre as a business instructor. So in order to have a productive conversation about specific academic genres, it's important to focus on one particular discipline at a time. So as a useful focus, I'm focusing on business GWAR. So next, let me tell you how I designed this workshop. First, I reflected on my teaching at the ALI and I identified issues outlined earlier in this presentation. I reviewed and reflected upon the relevant literature, which established my context. Following the models of previous studies, I consulted with several current GWAR Business 300 instructors about the specifics of their class, as well as their perceptions of multilingual students' needs and the amount of professional preparation to teach multilingual writers. I looked at the SFSU GWAR faculty website. I noted that the GWAR instructors at SF State have some support from the SF State English department in the form of professional development workshops on how to implement the principles of writing across the curriculum movement in their course. However, I could find no specific information on that indicated that these workshops focus explicitly on multilingual writers. These workshops and conversations, these conversations and observations informed how I structured this workshop. So from these methods, I outlined these objectives: to raise awareness of instructors' perceptions and attitudes towards multilingual writing, to provide strategies that instructors could use to scaffold multilingual writer comprehension, to engage in productive conversation about best practices and strategies for responding to multilingual writing that will facilitate academic discourse socialization. So next, I'd like to give you an overview of the workshop. The workshop focuses on effective feedback practices because feedback on written assignments is one of the ways that instructors can explicitly communicate genre expectations and apprentice learners into their specific academic discipline. In order to prepare for the workshop, participants would bring a copy of the course syllabus with grading criteria, as well as 2 or 3 samples of student writing in their class without commentary. The workshop is broken down into 3 sessions so that it could be offered either as a one-day 5-hour workshop or as a shorter series of 3 sessions, which with each meeting mapped out to be approximately 90-minute sessions. This would allow flexibility with scheduling the workshop to match participants' availability. In this training, my intent is for participants to build their community of practice as GWAR business instructors, reflect on their own feedback practices, as well as how their feedback apprentices students into the business discipline, and identify goals that are workable for them within their own teaching context. So now let's look at session 1, a specific task in session 1. So after some warm up and community building, participants would be asked to explicitly consider what are the characteristics of their community of practice. They would reflect on why students take their class, to think about the number of ESL or multilingual students in their class, as well as their own practices for distinguishing them. They would be asked to think about if they'd ever had an assignment which was successful with a monolingual native student, but which wasn't as successful with multilingual students, as well as possible ways that they may or may not be adapting their response strategies for multilingual students. The idea is that participants would take away these 3 concepts: that not every feedback or response strategy will be appropriate for multilingual students, and multilingual students need different approaches as well as language support. And finally, that instructors often act as socializing agents for students. So more comprehensive approaches to integrating writing intensive courses while addressing multilingual writers' needs would be ideal, such as the model pioneered by Dana Ferris at UC Davis. But professional development workshops can be a way to start the conversation and empower participants to begin considering component issues. I hope that with support, GWAR business instructors would continue to discuss these issues with their colleagues beyond the workshop. So I acknowledge that further work is necessary to improve the teacher training workshop before implementation. So first of all, a more robust and in-depth needs analysis is necessary to provide a more comprehensive understanding of all possible stakeholders. I would conduct a student survey. For example, I'd like to know how many multilingual writers are there in the business school, and what writing components of GWAR Business 300 do the students struggle with. Following the model of several ethnographic case studies, I'd hope to partner with instructors in the business school and observe their classes to understand the academic discourse socialization that's happening in the classroom. I would bring my workshop scaffold to a GWAR coordinator and seek their input to develop this teacher training workshop. So though there is a lot of work to do before piloting, I hope you'll take a few key things away from my project. That language and literacy acquisition does not only happen in a pre-university ESL classroom, but is an ongoing process throughout multilingual students' lives. We need to encourage more interdisciplinary research between L2 writing, composition, and writing across the curriculum movement. Moreover, the university needs to provide the institutional supports for writing across the curriculum GWAR instructors to teach not only writing, but to teach writing to multilingual writers. If we increase opportunities for multilingual writer experts to share their expertise with their colleagues across the disciplines, such as in the form of teacher training workshops, teachers would be empowered to teach and learners would be empowered to learn. So I'd also like to close my presentation with a few thank yous. I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to several individuals for supporting me throughout my graduate study. I'd like to, first of all, wish my sincere gratitude to all of my professors, especially my capstone advisor, Dr. Coles, for his guidance and feedback. This project stemmed from a paper that I first did in his reading writing class, English 732. I'd also like to express my sincere thanks to my professors, Dr. Osher and Dr. A, for their mentorship and support. I'm also grateful to Julia Schulte for her enthusiasm and insightful comments, which were tremendously helpful for preparing this presentation. And also, I'd like to thank the participants in my survey who willingly shared their time. I greatly thank you. And finally, I'd like to really thank my fellow teachers at the ALI, especially Cheryl, Mika, and Maria for their encouragement and support of my project. And I want to thank all of you for coming to my presentation. Thank you so much. I'll now end my presentation and I'll open the floor for Q&A. All right, I guess I'll take a look first at what's in the chat. I'm looking at Tara Lockhart. You have a question that says, given half of the Business 300 instructors are taught by the Backman's composition studies, how might their business activities leverage the workshops and perhaps deepened? That's an excellent question that I think I might need to take a little bit more time to consider. So that'll give me a little bit more insight to think about your question. Thank you very much, Tara. And Robert asks, Dr. Cole asks, would these workshops just be one-off, or would you follow up with workshops for the writing teachers? Would be, yeah, I would hope to be able to do more than one workshop. Possible other topics that I considered would be such as, scaffolding oral academic discourse, like academic discussions within class, and also potentially writing conferences. That's another part of the workshop I had considered. And I think that I'd hope that it would be more than, it wouldn't just be a one-off. That would be what I would hope. Kira asks, Yes, to answer your question, Kira, I do think that I would hope that this isn't just for business, but it could be adapted for any different discipline. Um, but for the sake of having a very specific context, I wanted to focus on just one academic discipline. But I believe that this could be successfully adapted for any particular discipline. I'm scrolling down and taking a look. Alfia asks, can you think of more about conveying appropriate ways of acting and feeling in business context? Would that include multimodal modeling? Alfia, do you want to unmute yourself and maybe explain your question?
Sure. So basically, I'm just asking what kind of text you would be using. Would it be purely, business conversation, or contracts, letter? Basically, what kind of ways you would be conveying the different genres that exist in business English, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's something that I would hope to work with those instructors who do have those expertise in those genres, so that they would help me to be able to understand what their specific genres that they're dealing with. As I myself am not a content expert, but I hope to partner with them to be able to make, a lot of times people, when you come to know something really well, you tend to forget that novices don't know that as explicitly. So, my key point here is to be able to partner with content experts so that they can make their body of knowledge more explicit and how to scaffold it out. So I think that including texts from various, auditory texts, not just written paper text, but texts in various methods, those 21st century literacy sort of things that Billy mentioned, would be a part of it, I would think. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take a few more questions. I'm going to take a look through here. I can see a question from Dr. Santos. Dr. Santos asks, what kind of written communication would you want teachers to more deeply appreciate in terms of genre expectations? That would be good writing in all those areas. Dr. Santos, maybe you could expand it, could you clarify your question? All right, well, that's an excellent question. I may not know if she's still here in the chat, but looks like she has, maybe she's not right here right now. Let's see, let me take a look at the other questions. Awesome. Sure. All right, thank you so much everybody for attending. Do you have any other oral questions you'd like to ask out loud without having to type into the chat? All right, thank you so much. I really appreciate friends and colleagues from around the world and across the country who have joined me for this presentation. I deeply appreciate you being here. I do want to give a shout out to my family and also my housemates who've had to put up with me not cleaning my chores for several months because I've been working on this, so my appreciation to them. I do need to let you know that the next presenter is beginning their presentation very shortly, so to join their talk, please leave my meeting and go look back to the conference website and click on the link for their presentation. So I'll be around for 1 or 2 more minutes if you'd like to chat with me personally. So I'll end the meeting now, but I'll end the formal meeting. So if you'd like to stay and chat, I'd be happy to talk with you for a few more minutes. So thank you so much.
Well done, Claire.